Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Raefe Jenkins podcast. Hey, we believe that entrepreneurs are the biggest asset in helping bring good quality problem-solving solutions to our society. And maybe you're not an entrepreneur, maybe you're not a business owner, but maybe, kind of like my next guest, maybe you're trying to figure out rent homes and figure out real estate investing. I have Todd Wilson as a mortgage loan officer. He focuses on primarily rent homes and getting financing for rent homes. Todd, how you doing?
I'm good, Rafe. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. So let's just go ahead and just start with tell us a little bit about yourself and what you have accomplished thus far, and we'll kind of just go from there.
All right, sounds good. So I've been in the mortgage industry since way back before the bubble burst in '08, and I kind of started out doing alternative financing, and that has really been kind of a big thing for me because everybody can do the regular, walk into the bank, I want a loan, and you qualify, but not everybody can do the loans when there's some problem that's preventing you from getting financing, even though you know that you should be able to get it. So
Right.
that's really where my main focus has been through my entire career in the mortgage industry.
And there's different type of loans out there, obviously, but let's just start from kind of the beginning. For someone that's trying to get, let's just make it even more basic, financing for a single family home. What type of financial options are there? What are some of the specifics we need to prepare for if we were wanting to go into that venture?
Okay, do you want me to cover both for rental properties or also for if that's going
Let's
to be
do
their
rental
primary?
properties. Let's
Okay,
focus on that.
all right. So for rental property, obviously if somebody can get their regular conventional type of loan, where they have their 20% down payment, they've got perfect credit, they've got plenty of income to qualify. And with those conventional loans, ideally, they also want to see a history of owning rental properties, which that can tend to be problematic, as well as having some cash reserves showing you've got at least 6 months worth of the payments as reserves in case the property isn't being rented for a while. Um, then you kind of go into the alternative where there's some issue. Like, for example, if you can't prove your income, if you're self-employed or you own too many rental properties for the banks to be happy with it, um, or even if it's a credit issue, or maybe the credit can be a problem. And that's really the program that, I've seen be really, really helpful for people because it allows you to qualify based on the rental income with the property that the property is going to generate. So on a purchase, they find out from the appraisal how much they think it's going to appraise, or not just appraise, but how much it's going to generate in rental income. And they use that to qualify. So you don't have to worry about what your income taxes look like.
Right. Like, is it pretty like my expectation of just giving 20% down on a down payment, or can you actually drop 5% down, kind of like your own personal home? What's
No,
the
you actually
full?
do need to have 20% down.
Hmm.
And,
Yeah.
the credit scores on this one are great because you could go down to a 600 credit score where there's no way a bank is going to take 600 credit score on a rental property.
And isn't it true, like you could actually like move out of your current home that you're financing, or even like make it where you drop 3.5% down or 5% down at your house, and then you just know that eventually this is going to be a rent home later on in life, maybe a year later or 10 years later or something like that. There's a lot of rules and regulations like taking that angle, but maybe talk about like the specifics of moving out of your current house and or trying to prepare in advance, like, hey, I'm going to live in it for 6 months, because I've heard a lot of people, especially like on bigger pockets, they talk about that, but I just don't know the law or like the rules and regulations of trying to take that approach. I know you could get in kind of like crummy waters with the bank if you try to take that angle, but what's the best approach if you're trying to use that
Well,
approach?
the best approach is to live there at least a year because then you can establish that it was your intention to live in there as your primary residence. If you're only in there for a few months, it could come into question. And, you just don't want to go down that road where, You get your owner occupied loan, and then you move out 6 months later, you buy another one that's owner occupied. You may not be able to get that second loan.
Yeah. So maybe the best approach is, every year move out, turn your previous home into a rent home, and for 4 years, and you got 4 different rent homes if you can figure out a way to get a bank to approve you.
You
Right?
could do it that way. Another way to do it too is if you live in there for 2 years, if you live there 2 years out of the last 5 years, it's your primary residence, then you could actually sell that property without having to pay capital gains as long as you're within the limits. Obviously, I'm not a tax professional, but you know, you get the capital gains limits where you can make $250,000 profit for an individual or 500,000 for a couple uh, without having to pay any taxes on that. But you have to live there 2 out of the last 5 years, and I believe you can only do that every 2 years. You can't do it like every year because then they go, no, sorry, you did that last year.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you told me that, because I'm looking into real estate, and that was actually one of my questions that I'm gonna, take to heart for myself. So you started this in 2008 during the whole world collapse, right?
Well, actually, I started in 2001, so I started
Uh,
before the collapse. So
so
I
what
experienced
did
it.
you see for single family homes? Like I've listened to a lot of people on podcasts that they were investing in apartment complexes and high luxury commercial properties, but like the single family homes, like what did that look like during 2008, 2009? Because I hate to be like this doomsday prepper, I'm definitely not, but I'm just realistic. Like our market just keeps going up and up and up, right? And we're bound to eventually have some sort of form of correction if we haven't already had one. It was COVID. But what did you see during 2008 and 2009 for people who were renting? And could you actually get a loan during that time, or did they put it all on pause? Or like, what was some of the stuff that you experienced from a renter's perspective?
Well, there was a lot less available for mortgages. I mean, basically, you had the conventional loans became very stricter. A lot stricter on what they would do and wouldn't do. And all the loans that people were getting before, where they didn't have to prove income, obviously those just went away. And there were two options. There was regular bank loans, and there was hard money, and there was nothing in between. So as far as renters, though, part of the problem that was occurring was that a lot of people were losing their homes, so they had to rent. And so there was a lot of competition for those rental properties, and a lot of the people who were trying to get a property to rent, they had credit issues because they had just lost a home in foreclosure. Now, property management companies were very difficult to deal with because, the first thing they do is they check your credit. They go, oh, sorry, you don't qualify. Your credit's not good enough. And so what a lot of people did that was successful was they would go to individual owners of these rental properties and talk to them, people that weren't property management companies, but ones that were actually managing their own properties. And so they kind of bypassed that whole credit thing and just explained, hey, here's the situation. And they showed that they had the ability to make the rental payment. And that's how a lot of people got their properties to rent.
So what you're saying is it's actually an advantage during a crisis, economic crisis like 2008, 2009, because the rent homes were even more valuable, and there was a high chance they could actually charge even more and find a more consistent person because everyone else were just getting foreclosures. That's interesting.
That's right.
You ever seen the movie Big Short or anything like
Oh,
that?
yeah.
I was so young. I'm not trying to like age you and be like, oh, how old were you? But I was a kid during 2008, 2009. I was actually in college, and like I kind of knew what was going on, but like I didn't know the severity until I watched like, The Big Short. So I could only imagine, the issue of it, So yeah, so for like so I think real estate, I mean stocks and real estate, that's the the 1-2 punch for people investing. Um,
Right.
I think I think obviously having your own business is a huge asset, but like I don't see stocks, being transferable from like other generations as real estate. Real estate seems to be such of a like, hey, my great grandpa had this house or my grandpa had this apartment complex. I don't hear anyone saying that about stocks. So getting into the idea of, financing a house that you could pass on to your kids and great grandkids, or, like maybe even 5 generations, depending on how far, your kids and grandkids want to go. Like real estate seems to be more of a common sense if you're wanting to leave a legacy. Wouldn't you agree?
I would definitely agree, because the thing with stocks is you are going to have some of those companies that are around for a long time and their stocks go up, and you know they can be very beneficial. But there are also plenty of companies that don't stand the test of time. Whereas if you own a house, over time, it's expected that it's going to continue to increase in value. Yes, there are going to be, you know, dips and valleys and, corrections during that course of time. But over the long haul, real estate does increase in value.
Absolutely. All right. So up to this point, we've been talking about like, hey, best case scenario this, best case scenario that. So let's talk about something I know you're a pro at, especially since you're in the mortgage loan. You're trying to figure out ways to get, people approved for financing and working with the banks. But like, what if someone had bad credit and they wanted to, invest in real estate or just get their own home? Like, what's the best approach that you've seen that you've been able to work with people on growing their credit and getting their credit, to get over 700 or whatever they need to get a better interest rate and a better loan?
Well, I tell you honestly, there are a couple different ways that I look at it. Number one is you have to look at the individual credit report to see what's on it, because you've got your five different credit scoring factors, and it depends what ones are affecting their score negatively on what you do to fix it. I'm not a proponent of credit repair for various reasons. Number one, your payment history only makes up 35% of your credit score, and when you do credit repair, you're only addressing that 35%. And so
Mm.
maybe a guy's credit score isn't where he wants it, so he pays for credit repair, and he's paying, you know, typically $90 a month to $120 a month as they're working to get these things off the credit report. But the other 65% could be affecting his score just as much or more than his payment history, and it's not being handled. So I've seen people who paid for credit repair for 2 years and their credit score is still in the low 600s and they can't get the loan that they want.
So what's the best approach on, if you can't work alongside a credit repair company? Like, do you just need to read books or go on YouTube, or like, what's the best approach? Because even to me, like learning how to like get my credit over X amount, I mean, a lot of times I feel like I'm in the dark.
Well, I'll tell you, obviously, there's a lot of information about credit, and some of it is true and some of it is not. I mean, you've probably encountered that yourself, looking online going, this doesn't make sense. Which is why I actually wrote a book on credit. It's called Crack the Credit Code. And, in the book, I tried not to make it too long so people would actually, want to take the time to read it, because it could be a very boring subject, honestly. I mean, who wants to talk about credit all day long? But, you know,
Right.
I tried to make it interesting. And, the feedback I've gotten from the book is that it actually is an easy read. Um, so
When did you
I
write
think
that
that
book?
would be where I would tell people to start.
When did you write it? When did you publish it?
I published it in 2019.
Interesting. So how was your journey of writing a book?
How was my journey of writing the book?
Yeah, like tell me like all the details. Obviously, this was your specialty. This is obviously something that you've, you know, day in and day out has helped people with. But if someone's listening right now and they're like, you know what, like I specialize in something different, maybe not it's credit repair, but something else, like how would they go about writing a book and developing a book? And what are some tools that you learned along the way that you could pass on to other people?
Well, the first thing I did was, I talked to other people to find out what they did, how was the best way to structure it. And what I found was very successful is that you simply write down all the top questions that people ask you about your area of expertise. And those are your chapter titles.
That is awesome.
I know it was brilliant. I was like, man, that I will never forget that.
That's great advice. That is great advice. Okay, so I consider myself, I really like sales. Really, really, really. And I study sales, and I'm about to write a book on sales. So basically I should just write down everyone's questions on how to make a sale, like the top 5 to 10 most common questions other people ask me. That's really cool. Very cool. So like, how long did it take? Did you have to find a publisher? Like, what's the process of like, going it from, your computer to actually in print?
Well, I published on Amazon because that way you don't have to worry about finding a publisher. You just publish it. So I publish on Amazon, and then I sell it as an ebook on my website for less than what people pay on Amazon. Um, but it took me about 2 months, start to finish.
Hmm. Very cool. And how many pages? Like ballpark? I know you don't know the
It's
exact.
about 110 pages.
Okay, pretty good read. 110 pages. Most people read like average, I think, less than one book a year, or like 5 books a year. I'll do that audio stuff. Like I think reading is super important, and always learning, and always improving yourself mentally and emotionally also. I mean, it's super important. So where would I go to get the book? Amazon, and what other platforms?
On my website, which is crackmycredit.com.
Yeah. Crackmycredit.com. Awesome. So talk about advance your reach, like the platform that I met you on, and then them getting you speaking gigs and everything like that. Like, talk about your journey of maybe getting into motivational speaking, or what's your ultimate goal here, because I would just assume that's what you were wanting to do, is getting into
Well,
motivational speaking.
yeah, I'll tell you, my ultimate goal is I want to change the way people look at credit, because credit has been such a huge problem for so many people. I mean, when I was doing my research for the book, I found out there were 87 million Americans that had bad credit and another 45 million that had no credit score at all.
Hmm.
So that means over half the adult population has either bad credit or no credit.
Wow.
And so I want to change that. I want to make it possible for everybody to have good credit, because anybody can have good credit as long as they have the right information.
Right.
And you can look online for days and days and find some of it here and some of it there. And that's what I did between that and talking to other people who were experts in it, to get the information and put it all together so that it wasn't hard for people to find.
Right. What's your thoughts on Dave Ramsey?
I think Dave Ramsey's got some good stuff, but his idea that you should have no debt whatsoever, I think is unrealistic, particularly because if you have no debt, that means you don't have good debt either.
Right.
Because there's good debt and bad debt. I mean, bad debt is, I'm already in debt more than I can afford, and I'm going to take my wife out to dinner and spend $200 and put it on a credit card because I want to. You know, that's
Right.
bad debt. But good debt is, hey, you know what? I got this program that I want to buy that's going to help me make, an extra $12,000 a year. So how much is it worth going into debt to make an extra $12,000 a year? And the answer would be anything less than $12,000, right?
Right. Right. Yeah,
So that would
absolutely.
be good debt.
So basically, good debt is anything that makes you more money.
Yeah, it
Would you
makes you
agree?
more money or gets you where you need to go. I mean, for example, most people can't just pay cash for a car, which doesn't mean you need to spend, 500 grand on the nicest car anybody owns on your block, but you need a car that's reliable, and, you're going to have debt to buy that car.
Right. Yeah. I used to be a big Dave Ramsey, not necessarily a supporter. I still support him from a distance, but with my own approach, and a little over a year ago, I started actually working on my credit, and I'm clear over, 700, and thankfully, like, I'm in the quote unquote good, like not average or bad anymore, because like I was like in the same statistic you were just talking about. I had no debt, or no credit, no debt, because I was just trying to live off like Roman noodles, my whole life, and just penny pinching, and it's just so unrealistic to not utilize debt and figure out ways to use debt for your advantage so you can make more money, especially like if you're starting a business, like, and you have good systems, good people in place, good everything in place. Getting in debt turns your 5-year goal into a 5-month goal.
Right,
It
right. Well,
speeds it up, speeds up the process.
yeah, and I think Advance Your Reach is a great way to do that, because they can teach you how to not only get in front of an audience, but how to speak to them in a way that your message will reach them and they get a benefit. And because they got a benefit, then they want to work with you.
Yeah, that's
You
good.
know, it's the whole idea of, you know, well, let's give something valuable so we help people, whether they were going to work with us further or not. We want to help them, and then once we've helped them, they may want to work with us further.
Absolutely. And interview is ultimately just open it up for you to say anything that's on your mind, either something reiterate something we already talked about, or maybe something that's off topic that we haven't mentioned. Either way, I'm just going to open it up for you, and then we'll kind of just close it out.
All right, great. Well, I'll tell you the one thing that I really do want to make sure people understand is that just because somebody tells you no, you can't get approved for a loan, it doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that you can't get approved for a loan that they have. And whether it's, you know, something you need to do with your credit to tweak it, or if it's a different loan program, you know, there are definitely options out there. And, you know, don't just give up because somebody told you no. Or, I mean, I honestly had somebody a couple of years ago that had been trying to get a construction loan on a house he had already begun. And he said he must have gone to 6 different places and they all told him no, but they didn't say it right away because a bank can't do a construction loan if you've already started. It has to be a private investor or a private lender. And, you know, when he was referred to me, I told him I could help him. He was like, "You're the first person that said they could help," and they actually did. So just because somebody says no, it doesn't mean that that's the ultimate answer.
That's awesome. So, how would people go about reaching out to you, getting in contact with you, getting in touch with you? What are some platforms they could do that?
Well, they could go to, you know, as I already gave the website, crackmycredit.com. My mortgage website is toddwilsonmortgage.com. Or they could just call. I mean, I've got my office phone is 707-401-8080.
Okay, awesome, man. Well, Todd, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me on, Rafe. I really appreciate that too.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, great.
Bye bye.
Bye.